We're going to start in about a minute. Just by way of introduction, I just wanted to share a quick idea. I actually heard this when I was in Montreal for Pesach from the rabbi of my shul. And he spoke about an article that he had read in the New York Times, maybe some of you have seen it. He spoke about how children in general, or people in general, are more resilient when they know the stories that happened to their ancestors. Not just the stories that happened of the good times, things that were the happiness, things that were the successes, but also the tragedies and also times that were difficult. This basically makes us more resilient and stronger when it comes to facing future challenges. He tied into Pesach, which I thought was actually a very interesting way to connect this, that really we just came from the Seder. The past few weeks, we all sat down with our families and we spoke really of what happened to our entire nation. You see at Mitzrayim, everything we went through, as our investor spoke this morning, Matzchil b'Gnut, Misayem b'Sheva, that we started off with the hardships of our nation, everything that we kind of move towards when it comes to our successes as well. I think it's very powerful that Yom Hashoah comes right after Pesach, where we really are able to kind of take this idea of talking about what our nation has gone through, what Am Yisrael has gone through, not just when it comes to Pesach, but also as we go through more recent tragedies, more modern tragedies, the Shoah as well, and where we're moving towards as a nation. We're very privileged today to have Mr. and Mrs. Spier here, who will be speaking to us, Tali's grandparents, who will be able to share really, Mr. Spier will share his experiences about what happened in the Shoah. How it's going to work is Mrs. Spier will speak first, and she's going to present a speech telling the story of everything Mr. Spier went through during the Shoah, during the Holocaust. Afterwards, Mr. Spier will answer any questions that you have. So we'll open it up, and anyone who has questions can raise their hand, and we'll be able to kind of hear your questions. He'll be able to answer them. Following that, Tali will share a few words as well. So, Mrs. Spier.
Because it's very emotional for Walter Spier to tell his story, I will tell it for him. He will gladly answer questions later. He also has some things to show you if you like. My name is Walter Spier. I was born in 1927 in Marburg, Germany, the youngest of 5 to my parents, Abram and Jenny Spier. We lived for the most part very happily and flourished in Germany until the Nazis came to power. My siblings and I attended the local school in Rauschholzhausen. In the beginning of 1938, the policeman in the town told my father that if Ernst von Roth, a member of the German embassy, died after having been shot by a young Jewish man, he would have to arrest him. This shows that not all Germans were Nazis. This occurred the day before the 9th of November, now known as Kristallnacht, the night of broken glass, when synagogues, Jewish homes, and businesses were demolished. To avoid being arrested, my father went to stay with relatives in a neighboring town. My oldest brother, who was then 17 years old, was arrested and sent to Buchenwald. Since I was the only one at home, my mother sent me to the neighboring town, about 5 miles away, to check on the welfare of my father and our other relatives. At the age of 11, I ran through the woods and back. Julius returned from Buchenwald after about 4 weeks with orders to leave Germany within a couple of weeks. He, my sister Edith, and brother Alfred left for England on the Kindertransport with the hope that my parents, brother Martin, and I would soon follow. This did not happen since we were not able to leave Germany. Since no Jew was allowed to attend a public school at that time, I was sent to a Jewish school in Frankfurt. Soon, children and teachers disappeared as they emigrated to avoid being harassed. There was no longer a Jewish school, so I returned home to what was the end of my education at the age of 14. My bar mitzvah in October 1940 was held in our living room because there was no longer a synagogue. In September 1942, all the Jews of our town and the vicinity, including my parents, my brother Martin, myself, and our grandmother, were deported to Theresienstadt, Czechoslovakia. Our grandmother died there at the age of 83. In 1944, The remaining 4 of us were transferred to Auschwitz. When we arrived there, our father told Martin and myself that they would not survive, but if my brother and I did, we should return to our hometown. Immediately, we were separated, and our parents were gassed the next day. I was tattooed with a number, A1838, as though I was no longer a person, only a number. I still have that number on my arm, and I'm willing to show it to you later. After a while, I was transferred to Sosnovitz, where I was forced to work in an ammunition factory. As the Allies were approaching, we were put on a death march to Mauthausen. The reason it is called a death march is because so few survived. The only way that I survived was with the aid of an SS officer who shared his food with me and kept me from sleeping so that I would not freeze to death, as so many others did. When we arrived in Mauthausen, I was hit with a whip in order to find out how I survived. I still have the marks on my back, and the whip and the bench are on display in the museum in Mauthausen. In May of 1945, I was liberated by the U.S. Army's 11th Infantry Division. I was 17 and a half years old, all alone, with no idea of what was going on in the outside world. That is when God sent me an angel in the form of Captain Michael Levy. I do not know why Captain Levy chose me or in what language we communicated. Captain Levy saved my life. He nursed me back to health and gave me the strength to rebuild my life. One day, Captain Levy told me that the U.S. troops had to pull out and that the Russians were taking over. He asked if I had somewhere to go. I remembered what my father had said. Captain Levy got me clothes and drove me to Linz, Austria, where he put me on a train to Munich in Germany. He told the conductor to make sure that I got on another train closer to my hometown. When I arrived in Marburg, about 8 miles from Rauschholzhausen, early in the morning, the station manager told me there would not be another train till evening, but that another boy had passed through several days earlier. I had a feeling it was my brother Martin. I didn't wait for the train, but started walking. I soon saw a bicycle, which I took, but returned several days later. I found Martin still asleep. We remained very close and still lived in the same building in Washington Heights. In June 1946, Martin and I emigrated to the U.S., where I found out that Captain Levy had placed an ad in a German Jewish newspaper, the Aufbau, through which my sister Edith found out that I was alive. I have a copy of that ad for you to see. Martin and I moved in with my sister, who had only a 1-bedroom apartment. We took turns sleeping on the couch and the other on the floor. When we got jobs, we found other sleeping arrangements. We came to the U.S. wearing very heavy clothing and wanted to buy a lighter pair of pants. Since we didn't have enough money for 2 pair, Martin, as the older, got a pair, and I bought a pair the next week after I got my paycheck. In 1951, I married my wife Carla, who was lucky to have left Germany at the age of 6 with her parents. Together, we raised 2 sons who married 2 lovely daughters and raised 5 grandchildren. 2 of our grandchildren are married, and we have 1 great-grandchild. Never would I have thought 68 years ago that I would be able to speak to you about my life story and to show you that Judaism did not die in the Holocaust.
Thank you so much, Mrs. Spier, for reading your husband's story. Mr. Spier will now come up, and if anyone has any questions, we'll be happy to answer them.
Thank you for inviting me, and if anybody has any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. and I will say a few words afterwards. If you have any questions.
Why do you think the SS man helped you during the Death March?
Good question. I don't know. I never found out. The only thing is I can tell you, when the American army came into the camp, we told the captain to take his uniform off and put regular clothes on. And we told whoever was in charge from the American army that he should leave him alone, and because he was different than all the other Germans. Yes,
What was life
a little louder, please.
What was life like in Germany before you were deported to Theresienstadt?
Again,
What was life like in Germany before you were deported to Theresienstadt?
before we, just like here, we lived a normal life. We were, I don't know how well off or not, I don't remember, but we had a synagogue, we had a Jewish life, the mothers, the women on a clear day, on a warm day, they used to go into a garden on a Shabbos afternoon, and they had their coffee clutch, just like here. Yes.
Did you have any friends that you found after the war from your hometown?
Very few. Very, very few. Like, if you come to our house, like my wife, like I said earlier, that we were in Frankfurt, which was a Jewish school, just like here, and we have pictures which my father gave to a Gentile, and he gave it back to us after the war. I'm sorry to say, no. No, I don't. We used to go, there is still a hotel on 113th Broadway, the Hotel Marseille, and Saturday night we used to go there, and mostly survivors, and we felt close to them because I'm sorry to say that the Jews in America weren't interested in the story. Only in the late 50s, when all the survivors were a little bit more settled, we popped up and we spoke up, and we felt we got to tell it to the young people and the old people that's what went on. Because when we came, nobody wanted to know. I'm sorry to say, later on they realized I could tell you stories, you would say, no, there isn't so. All I can tell you is, when we got married, we moved into the Heights, and then later on the 187th and Bennett, there's a synagogue, Mount Sinai Jewish Center. And after a while, I got on the board, and before long, I became president. And the custom in our shul was between Yom Kippur, between Mincha and Maariv, or the president and the vice president, and the rabbi says a few words. When I came up, I said, if we would have had the Jews in the 40s, like we have today in the 80s, no 6 million would have died. Because we have for today, even then, we have a Holocaust library, we have Kristallnacht every 9th of November, we have Yom Hashoah last night, which we added on later on. We have a beautiful statue in the lobby, which was, we were the only ones going up 40 blocks, going down 40 blocks in New York. Nobody had anything. Then after a while, thank God, people started to pop up. Like 10 years ago when the museum in Washington celebrated the 10th anniversary, we went, and there were a lot of survivors. We wore tags from different camps, and we sat on the table, and even then, I didn't recognize anybody. Like one of our sons lives in Fairlawn, and there's a young fella next to my son, and then his father. And after a while, we started to talk, and we found out we were in the same camp. But he didn't know me, and I didn't know him. A couple of years back, we gave a kiddush in our shul, 60th anniversary or liberation. And afterwards, a gentleman who lives next door in the next house, came to me and he says, you know, I was liberated in Mauthausen. He didn't know me and I didn't know him. Maybe we could have slept in the same bunk and we didn't recognize each other. Yes?
Did you have any hesitations to go back to your hometown after you were liberated?
I'm sorry?
Did you hesitate at all to go back to your hometown after you were liberated?
Yes. After, like I said, we got a few dollars in our pocket and we made a living. My wife and I, we went back to our hometown. We went to the cemeteries and we didn't even realize we had a hate in us and we didn't want to know the Germans. And there was a kosher hotel in Bad Nauheim, like a nice community. We stood over Shabbos and we drove around. And when I retired 13 years ago, I said to my two sons, you know, I made a promise that someday I'm going to go back. I want to come back. And I said to my sons, you take the time, you pick the time, and whenever you want to go, my wife and I will go with you. A couple of years later, Debbie's son came to me and he says, why don't you take us? And we went there. We went to Theresienstadt, where we first were, and then where I was liberated in Mauthausen, because I could not go back to Auschwitz. It's impossible. And a year and a half ago, a Gentile lady, got involved in the Jewish history because she heard so much about it, and she got involved with the principals in the neighboring town. And we got a letter that they would invite us, my brother and my sister. God bless my sister is 92 at that time. She was a little over 90. And my brother is today 67. 87, I'm sorry. And they couldn't go, and I didn't want to go. Finally, my grandchildren said, you gotta go. And we, with a heavy heart, we went. And soon as we landed in Frankfurt at the airport, there was a man and a woman there who took pictures and interviewed us. I tell you, we were pleasantly surprised, and they had a ceremony at our hometown cemetery, but they didn't have it on the cemetery. They had enough sense, they shouldn't go on the cemetery. They had all the names which were buried there for the last 30 years. They had pictures and the history hanging on there. And the gentleman who drove us up I said to him, what do you think how long it should take? So he says, well, it's 6 o'clock, by 7 o'clock we are finished. At 9:30 we were still there, it was dark, and you can imagine the way people like you, a little older, a little younger, the questions they asked, and why did we leave Germany? So I said, I had a hate in the Germans, but the younger generation today is interested in the Jewish history. I should have brought a letter along. We get plenty of emails, even today. Every week we get different emails. One lady wrote a letter. She apologizes for her parents and her grandparents that they did not help the Jewish people. On the other hand, there were plenty of Germans who threw food over the fence at night so we had something to eat, because we were only allowed to shop certain hour, certain days, and it was not a pleasant thing the last 2 years in the 40s in Germany. Yes.
After you were liberated and you went back to your hometown, did you find any remnants of your old home?
I'm sorry?
After you were liberated and you went back to your hometown, were you able to find any remnants of your old home?
The home was still standing there. The only thing is some furniture were missing, and how shall I say it, the one in charge of the hometown, they made sure that we get our furniture back. My parents never sold the house, and matter of fact, we are still fighting with some property which were never sold, but after so many years, you know, it's very difficult. Yes,
What was it like to sleep in the barracks?
I'm sorry?
Is that easy?
What is it like?
What was it like for you to sleep in the barracks?
The first time we went to Mauthausen, and you had to show your passport, which we have here today, which was signed by the American Army. You could have given any name or any birthday, because you were only recognized by your number. And when we went in the first time with my wife, there was a line to get in. And I didn't want to stay in line. I walked right in, and I recognized the barrack where I was tortured. And I walked in, the barrack was empty, and the lady came in, and she says, why don't you stay in line? So I said, I stood in line many years ago. I was tortured in that barrack. She was in charge of the camp. She didn't want to believe that I came back. And she took me and my wife to the museum, where all kinds of pile of shoes around the wall. Hitler didn't make no difference if you were Orthodox, conservative, or Reformed, or half-Jew. You were treated the same way. And then we saw a glass cage, and I saw the whip there. Anybody? Yes.
What was it like when the war ended? How did you feel?
We were, don't forget, we were shut off from the world several years. We had no idea what went on the outside. No idea. We were like, I watched outside, you have a film out there. There was a gentleman talking, Benjamin Mead, who has had every year the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising. And he said on the film just now, he says, you can't believe, I can't believe, he said, that we were that quiet. Like I said, we were numb. We were numb. After a while, you got to yourself. Yes?
Why did you decide to remain Jewish after all you've been through?
My whole family, my background were, I don't know what to say, from or what. I know they were Yom Hashoah, and they lived their life as Jews. And the last word, what our father said to my brother and me, you will make it like I have in that letter, and be proud of your name, of our name. And we wanted to show the world, despite what Hitler did to a lot of people, including me, where I was standing as probably your age when I lost my parents, I said to myself, I gotta come and show the world that Hitler couldn't get the Jewishness out of me. And thank God, like my wife read in the article, we kept a kosher house, we sent our kids to yeshiva, and they married lovely ladies. We have 5 grandchildren today. They all went to yeshiva, and I'm very, very grateful what we accomplished. And that's why that's why I'm standing here today and tell the young people what went on, and never forget, it should never, never happen again. Anybody else? Yes,
Did you ever witness a death?
I'm sorry,
Did you ever witness any death? Like, did you ever
I don't hear you.
Did you ever witness like a death?
No, no.
I think we'll take one final question.
Yes,
Knowing that your generation will be, like that our generation will be the last generation to hear the stories firsthand, did that make you more eager to share your story?
yes, even so, it's very difficult. Debbie's brother and Debbie's son and Tali's brother works in yeshiva, and he's a Gemara teacher there. And we had Yom Hashoah last year, a program. It is very difficult for me to speak. That's why my wife read the letter. On Shabbos, we were up in White Plains. A good friend of ours, we were friendly with the parents. He's the president of the shul, and he says, Walter, would you like to speak? So I couldn't say no to him, because, like I said, you gotta teach the young people what went on. How many, when we had the Kristallnacht, the first Kristallnacht in our shul, there was Rabbi Schechter, who was a captain in the American Army, and he liberated Buchenwald. And we had the first Kristallnacht. I called him up. He says, I won't do it, I said to him, we do it. I started that, and why don't you come? And he spoke. And afterwards he said, Mr. Spier, I'm grateful to you that I came and let the people know what went on. When we had the first Kristallnacht, like you light 6 candles and we call the survivors, 6 survivors up. There was, people got mad at me that we didn't call this one, we didn't call this one. Today when we had the Kristallnacht, we had to look for survivors because there are not many left anymore. Thank you very much, and I hope that you will continue for the next generation.
Thank you so much to Mr. and Mrs. Spier, especially Mr. Spier, for sharing his story. Tali's going to say a few words now.
As a child, I believed that the word hero was used to denote a being with superhuman strength or mythical powers. I always imagined Superman, Batman, and other comic book characters as the heroes of my childhood. I thought of our Avot and Imahot, as well as Moshe Rabbeinu and other Nevi'im, as Jewish heroes. In English class, I thought of Mr. Darcy of Pride and Prejudice as a romantic hero. Yet my true definition of a hero hits closer to home in the figures of 2 men who have had an immense impact on my life and have helped me grow and develop in many ways. Hero number 1, Grandpa Walter. Hero number 2, Captain Michael E. Levy. As you have just heard, Captain Levy was instrumental in restoring my grandfather to life after World War II. He liberated my grandfather from Mauthausen on May 5, 1945. But hero Captain Levy didn't stop there. He nursed my grandfather back to health, helped him return to his hometown in Germany, and placed ads in the newspaper so that my grandfather was able to reunite with his siblings. My grandfather never forgot about Captain Levy. Grandpa Walter always told his children and grandchildren how Captain Levy raised his spirits and made him feel human again after the war. Grandpa Walter stressed the importance of giving thanks to those who help us and remembering the good that people do for us. For years and years, our family had searched without success to find our family hero, Captain Levy. My grandfather owes his life to Captain Levy and forever wants to express that debt of gratitude towards him. Last year, a Pulitzer Prize-winning AP investigator was finally able to locate Captain Levy's family. Unfortunately, Captain Levy died in 1983, but our family was overjoyed to now be in contact with his daughters, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren. Our families have had a phone conference, and we have even had the opportunity to meet in person, where we shared stories about my grandfather's experience during the Holocaust and about Captain Levy's heroic actions. As I had the opportunity to hear more and more about the actions of Captain Levy, I thought more and more about what I would do if I were in his situation. I wondered if I would have that same courage that he had to give of himself to help my grandfather. I wish each and every day that God would give me just a few minutes to talk with our family hero, Captain Levy. I wish that I could express my gratitude towards him for saving my grandfather and essentially being responsible for the wonderful life I live each and every day, filled with new opportunities to serve Hashem. I wish that I could ask him a few simple questions. What drove him to his benevolence? Why did he put himself out to the degree that he did in order to help my grandfather? Why did he take all the time, effort, and expense to succor my fragile grandfather that he did not even know? These questions are left ringing in my conscience each and every day. These unanswered questions leave me with the drive to step up to the plate in times of need. The value of helping others was passed down to me from my grandfather after him having been the beneficiary of the chesed of Captain Levy. Each act of chesed that I am involved in stems from a value that was instilled in me, dating all the way back to May 5, 1945, the day that Captain Levy liberated Grandpa Walter. After each act of chesed that I participate in, I leave with a smile, a feeling of pride that I took the lessons of my heroes and have let them impact my daily life. I feel that I am giving back to my community and passing down the legacy of chesed that I learned from Captain Levy, and that I hope I can pass down that legacy to you today. Take every opportunity that you can to help the person around you. You never know how far it will take them. In addition, the story of my grandfather and Captain Levy brings out many more lessons. The fact that my grandfather never gave up hope of finding Captain Levy teaches us that no matter how big or small the challenge, we must never give up hope. This is how my heroic grandfather lives. He never gave up hope of survival during the Holocaust, and he never gave up hope of finding his hero 67 years after the Holocaust. I learned from him that when you don't give up, you will succeed. It may be a long and drawn-out path on the way, but ultimately, the perseverance through the waiting game will pay off. Grandpa Walter always tells me that he had a very difficult childhood, but now that he is able to watch his children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren strive in Yiddishkeit, he cannot complain. My grandfather found Captain Levy's family, even though it may not have turned out exactly as he wished, in that he was not able to thank Captain Levy himself. The bond that has been created between the Spier and Levy families is something to treasure and be thankful for. Living with this positive attitude of hope and constant perseverance characterized my grandfather as a hero. Even when there does not seem to be an end, and we are faced with a situation in which it seems like nothing is going the way we want it to, we must always try to keep a positive perspective, like my grandfather always does, and remember that there is always light at the end of the tunnel. The Gemara in Brachos 60b says, Kol ma'ata avid rachman al atav avid. Everything that Hashem does is for the good. One of my favorite English quotes says, everything will be okay in the end. If it's not okay, then it's not the end. Moving on to another lesson, my grandfather's relentless hope to find his hero to thank him teaches us the importance of Hakaras HaTov. I am confident that my grandfather thanked Captain Levy when he helped him at the time and sent him off on the train. That could have been it, but my grandfather did not stop there. It was not enough for Grandpa Walter. He went the extra mile for 67 years until he found Captain Levy's family to express one more degree of gratitude towards them. In my eyes, that is a heroic action. I think that the words thank you are two of the most important words that we utter throughout our days. Whether someone does a small gesture, such as holding open the door for us, or a larger gesture, such as allowing us to stay at their house while we have a blackout, it is important to always thank them several times for the kindness that they showered us with, and make sure that they recognize that they made a difference. Personally, I am Tali Spier because of Captain Levy. Captain Levy enabled the chain that brought me into this world. He enabled me to live in a time where I am privileged to be a religious Jew and to observe Torah in every sense in a public manner with pride. I learned the timeless lesson of helping others from Captain Levy. My family's 67-year search to thank Captain Levy taught me the importance of hope during challenging times. When it looks like there is no end, there is no reason to give up. My grandfather taught me not to ever let anyone's act of kindness go unnoticed. It is important to show them that you care and appreciate what they have done for you. Captain Levy will always be viewed as a hero in the eyes of his children in Texas, in the eyes of the Spiers in New York and New Jersey, and in particular in my eyes. My grandfather will also always be viewed as a hero in the eyes of our family and in the eyes of all of those who have been privileged to meet him or hear him speak over the years. The way that Grandpa Walter dealt with the search to find Captain Levy to thank him, and the way that he lives his life each and every day are truly heroic. Let us leave this Yom Hashoah inspired, taking the lessons learned from my grandfather's story with Captain Levy as instrumental building blocks in our development as Jewish women who live lives with positive attitudes of hope and who never let anything go unnoticed. Thank you, Ma'anot, for giving my grandparents the opportunity to come and speak today. And thank you, Grandma and Grandpa, for taking your time to inspire the Ma'anot student body today and to inspire me every day of my life.
Thank you, Tali. And thank you again so much to the Spiers for coming and sharing their inspiring story. The Spiers have brought different documents. If anyone has any questions now or in the break between periods, you can feel free to go up to the Spiers to see their documents, to ask them any follow-up questions. Just a quick announcement on what's going to happen.